What's up, guys? Yo, this is Fanboy here, and this is the longer range show of INDY or No Career, Part 21. I got some things to say. Oh, it's, thanks you, Shane, for being on my show, man. No, I turned to a little kid when you came unannounced on my show to explain something to you. One of your old former superstars of EIW. I mean, oh man, I turned to a kid. I wanted an autograph, a picture with you and everything. But let's get down to business. Cage, man, you got a lot of things to be. You got a lot of things. You talk too much shit. You talking about you gonna win this and that. Let me tell you something about a little story about Young in Detroit because you never faced the dude. Ever since you've been at EIW, you never faced him. A boy named Young in Detroit, a father named Mr. Detroit, the mother named Mrs. Detroit. They all was from Thailand. They knew their son wanted to be a drawer. He wanted to be an artist. The dad didn't like that, so the dad told my son is going to be a Muay Thai fighter of all time. The mom said, "Let the boy dream. Let the boy be what he want to be." The dad said, Mr. Detroit said, "I don't want my son to be a punk pussy who draws for a living." So his Mr. Detroit didn't like that. So one day, Mr. Detroit threw Yana Detroit in a ring against two male Muay Thai fighters. They almost killed Yana Detroit in that ring. And Mr. Detroit threw the white towel in and dragged his son out. Mrs. Detroit was crying. She was crying her eyes out, telling Mr. Detroit, "How can you do this to our son? How can you make our son do this knowing that he can't defend himself?" Those are grown men. Those are like 40 or 30 years old grown men in that ring. And you gonna throw our son in there like he's a freaking wolf. I mean, like he's some kind of guinea pig, and they're some dang hungry ass wolves. So one day, Mrs. Detroit got up and packed her bags. Mr. Detroit got on his knees begging, talking about, "Don't leave, don't leave." Mrs. Detroit came to Young Detroit and she gave him a kiss on his head and said, you could be what you want to be. The choice is yours. It's your destiny." Out of nowhere, she gave the last kiss to Mr. Detroit. She walked away, got in a cab, and drove off. And out of nowhere, Mr. Detroit blamed Young Detroit for his bullshit problems. He beat him. He beat him so bad that Young Detroit couldn't walk no more. Next morning, Young Detroit was barely walking. Then out of nowhere, let's say Mr. Detroit was still angry that his wife left. So he took his power out on his son, took him to the woods. Matter of fact, it wasn't in the woods. It was the freaking barnyard. He took his son to the barnyard, tied him hand by hand, and took a scrap and beat, not even a scrap, a damn wooden ass stick and beat his back in. He was beating his back in, and out of nowhere, the next day, after the next day, he kept doing it, he kept doing it, he kept doing it till his son fights back. And one day his son broke those ropes and beat his shit out of his dad, and his dad was laughing every moment while his son was punching him in the face. So, the age of 14, he threw his son in a Muay Thai ring against a guy they call Goliath. He threw him in a ring with Goliath. Out of nowhere, you get the picture. You get the picture. Oh, it was no concussion or anything. It was no broken arms, no broken ribs, no broken leg. You get the picture. He was DOA. Young in Detroit roundhouse him so hard it killed him. So, Mr. Cage, I know you're gonna try to tell you a little story. It doesn't matter about your little story. You probably just gonna say it just to, you know, get people notice or get people attention or try to throw the contenders' minds off. You're not gonna throw their minds off. You're gonna make it more eager to hurt you, especially down in Detroit. So Cage, you go to down to EIW, right? You're stepping in you stepping in youngest Detroit world of Muay Thai. You stepping in his jungle. Why the fuck you would come back for? You got a vendetta over King DW. You what King DW got in your head told you you still can't win the big one, so you would come to EIW, the low class for rookies and new talent, to prove themselves, just to win the title, just to prove to King DW. You call yourself a legend? I don't think you call yourself a legend, because a legend would have their guard on. You had your guard off. You let your guard down. You let a rookie throw you off because what he said, and you trying to prove what, nigga? You fucking DG US champ. You Dragon Gate champ. What you trying to prove? You already proved enough. Now you going down here holding spotlights and shit. For what? You got a vendetta over King DW and what? There's a lot of superstars that have vendetta over you. You don't hear them calling your name. So, Fraud Johnson, the king of aerial. Well, he is the king of aerial because he's the EIW world champ. He do moves that no man can do. Not even Cage. I mean, Cage can pull off the basic old school high flying moves. You talking about a freaking guy could pull off a shooting star fraud splash. A shooting star. I mean, a fraud splash 450. A 450 fraud splash. How did the F you pull off a 450 and then transform into a fraud splash? This guy could do much anything in the ring. So you beat it, Cage. You beat Fraud Johnson before. You beat him before. You told him you still got a lot to learn. You're not on his level. Well, the motherfuckers the EIW world champ. He Yannick Detroit is the risk taker world champ. So what he had to prove? It seems to me that once they grab the major title, they already proved it. That's the motto. You grab something that is major, that is a target on your back, you prove something. Fraud Johnson and Yannick Detroit proved something. So, Cage, you talking about you gonna stump their heads and you talking about you gonna win the match. You don't know who's gonna win the match. You're not a fucking scientist. You're not a freaking what you call them, a mind reader, or a some kind of psychic. You don't know that. You go in the ring, you prove, you bust your ass like everyone else. And out of nowhere, you probably gonna beat and I'm short. So, and you say something about Americans don't get it. You live in America. It'd be fun if America come out of nowhere and pop you in the face. So, you can't prove that. You can't prove that you gonna win. You don't never know, because you face Fraud Justin, and Fraud Justin, yeah, you said Fraud Justin took you to your limit. I don't think he took you to your limit. I think he was just testing your ass. See how far can you go. And I guess that test, Fraud Johnson passed the test. But this is the real test. He's champion and you're champion. Yannick Detroit's champion. Champion versus champion versus champion. This means a lot. You're stepping in the ring of EIW. just to get a vendetta over King DW, just to prove something that you still got it. How stupid that sounds. You throwing yourself off. You ain't got your head right. You trying to prove a vendetta. Wrong way to prove it.